Have you ever looked at Kim Kardashian's dramatically curved silhouette and wondered how she maintains balance while walking in high heels? Or questioned whether her famous proportions could exist in nature without violating fundamental principles of human biomechanics? Or noticed how her iconic hourglass figure seems to defy the basic physics of center of gravity that govern how every other human being maintains stability and posture? What if I told you that Kim Kardashian's body proportions represent one of the most fascinating case studies in applied physics, demonstrating Emmy Noether's conservation principles in ways that reveal the hidden mathematical constraints governing human anatomy, balance, and the limits of what's physically possible in biological systems? Today, I'm going to analyze the physics of the world's most famous curves, explaining why certain body proportions create mechanical challenges that must be solved through sophisticated compensatory mechanisms. The human body represents one of nature's most remarkable engineering achievements, with proportions that have been optimized through millions of years of evolution to create stable, efficient, and mobile biological machines. Emmy Noether's conservation principles help us understand why human anatomy follows predictable mathematical patterns. The distribution of mass throughout the body must be balanced in ways that allow for stable bipedal locomotion while maintaining the ability to perform complex motor tasks. Every aspect of human proportions, from limb lengths to torso dimensions to the distribution of muscle and fat tissue, reflects evolutionary solutions to fundamental physics problems. Center of gravity, the point where an object's weight is evenly distributed in all directions, determines stability, balance, and movement efficiency for any physical system, including the human body. In typical human anatomy, the center of gravity is located approximately at the second sacral vertebra, about 55% of total height from the ground in males, and slightly lower in females due to differences in pelvic structure and fat distribution. This positioning represents millions of years of evolutionary optimization for bipedal locomotion, creating the most efficient balance point for walking, running, and maintaining upright posture. Kim Kardashian's dramatically enhanced proportions, achieved through a combination of surgical procedures, body contouring, and strategic fashion choices, create a mass distribution that significantly alters the normal human center of gravity calculations. Her notably enlarged buttocks and hips shift substantial mass toward the posterior and lower portions of her torso, while her proportionately smaller waist create an extreme hourglass silhouette that concentrates mass away from the body's natural balance point. This redistribution creates what physicists would recognize as a fundamentally unstable system that requires constant compensatory adjustments to maintain equilibrium. The physics of walking with an altered center of gravity reveals the sophisticated biomechanical adaptations required when human proportions deviate dramatically from evolutionary norms. Walking is essentially controlled falling. Each step involves briefly losing balance and then recovering it through precise timing of muscle contractions and weight shifts. When the center of gravity is shifted significantly backward due to enlarged buttocks and hips, the forward momentum required for each step must overcome additional rotational forces that weren't present in the original anatomical configuration. Emmy Noether's insights about symmetry and conservation help explain why extreme body modifications create cascading effects throughout the entire musculoskeletal system. The human spine, pelvis, and leg muscles evolved as an integrated system where each component's function depends on the others maintaining their original proportional relationships. When mass distribution changes dramatically in one area, conservation of mechanical forces requires compensatory changes throughout the entire kinetic chain. Different muscle groups must work harder, joint angles must adjust, and movement patterns must be modified to maintain stability. The mathematical analysis of Kim Kardashian's proportions reveals why her walking gait, posture, and movement patterns appear different from typical human biomechanics. High-speed video analysis of her walking shows compensatory mechanisms that physics would predict for someone with her mass distribution: a more pronounced forward lean of the torso to counterbalance posterior mass, shorter stride lengths to maintain stability, increased muscle activation in the core and lower back to control spinal alignment, and modified arm positioning to assist with balance during locomotion. The engineering challenges of designing clothing and footwear for dramatically altered body proportions also demonstrate physics principles in action. Fashion designers working with Kim Kardashian must account for the altered stress distributions, different pressure points, and modified center of gravity when creating garments that provide adequate support and maintain structural integrity. High heels, which already challenge human balance by raising the center of gravity and shifting weight forward onto the toes, become even more mechanically challenging when combined with posteriorly shifted mass distribution. The biomechanical analysis of sitting, standing, and transitional movements reveals additional physics challenges created by extreme proportional modifications. Rising from a seated position normally involves shifting the center of gravity forward over the feet before extending the legs to lift the body upward. With significantly enhanced buttocks dimensions, this movement requires greater forward momentum and stronger muscle activation to overcome the additional posterior mass that resists forward weight transfer. But the physics implications extend beyond simple balance and movement mechanics to fundamental questions about the structural limits of human anatomy. The human skeletal system evolved to support specific mass distributions and loading patterns. When surgical modifications dramatically alter these distributions, they create stress concentrations in bones, joints, and connective tissues that weren't designed to handle the new loading conditions. This represents a violation of the engineering principles that guided human anatomical evolution over millions of years. The conservation of energy principles governing human movement efficiency also reveal why extreme body modifications can create metabolic costs that weren't present in the original anatomical configuration. Walking with an altered center of gravity requires additional muscle activation to maintain stability and control movement patterns, increasing the energy expenditure required for basic locomotion. This represents a trade-off between aesthetic goals and biomechanical efficiency that demonstrates how physics constrains even cosmetic modifications. The psychological and social aspects of extreme body modification also involve physics principles through the mechanisms of visual perception and social signaling. Human brains evolved sophisticated pattern recognition systems for assessing body proportions, health, fertility, and other characteristics that were important for survival and reproduction. Proportions that deviate dramatically from evolutionary norms trigger different neural responses and social reactions because they violate the mathematical patterns that our perception systems expect to see. The medical implications of extreme proportional modifications reveal how Emmy Noether's conservation principles apply to long-term health outcomes. The human body represents a complex system where forces, stresses, and metabolic demands must be distributed in sustainable ways. When surgical modifications create significant changes in mass distribution or loading patterns, they can initiate cascading effects that may not become apparent until years or decades later, as compensatory mechanisms gradually break down under the altered physics demands. The cultural influence of Kim Kardashian's proportions on beauty standards. The next time you see Kim Kardashian navigating the world in her dramatically modified proportions, remember that you're witnessing a fascinating demonstration of human adaptation to altered physics constraints. Her body represents a real-world experiment in how biological systems respond when surgical modifications shift the center of gravity and change the fundamental mechanical properties that govern human movement and stability. While her proportions may challenge conventional anatomy, they also demonstrate the remarkable adaptability of human physiology and the sophisticated compensatory mechanisms that allow people to function even when their bodies deviate significantly from evolutionary norms. The physics of her famous curves reveal deeper truths about the mathematical constraints that govern human anatomy, the engineering principles that guide biological system design, and the limits of what's possible when we attempt to modify the proportional relationships that millions of years of evolution carefully optimized. Emmy Noether would recognize in Kim Kardashian's biomechanical adaptations the same conservation principles that govern all complex systems. Energy must be conserved, forces must be balanced, and stability must be maintained even when the system's parameters are dramatically altered from their original configuration. Understanding the physics behind extreme body modifications helps us appreciate both the remarkable engineering of normal human anatomy and the sophisticated biological adaptations that allow individuals to function successfully even when their proportions challenge conventional biomechanical assumptions. If you're fascinated by the intersection of celebrity culture, human anatomy, and the physics principles that govern biological systems, subscribe to explore more ways that Emmy Noether's conservation laws apply to the human body, beauty standards, and the biomechanical challenges created when we push anatomy beyond its evolutionary design parameters. We're uncovering the hidden physics operating in celebrity culture, fashion, and the ongoing human desire to modify our bodies in pursuit of aesthetic ideals, revealing how conservation laws, engineering principles, and biological constraints shape even the most dramatic expressions of personal transformation. Hit that subscribe button